I started refinishing this piece years ago and never came back and finished it. It is now time to get this one done. My name is Sarah, and I like to take things that are ugly and beat up or pulled out of the trash and make them beautiful again. Welcome to my channel. When I started working on this piece, it had multiple layers of paint, and I wanted to find a picture of what it originally looked like, and I found this one where I used it as a little side table for our trunk or treat booth, and it was painted all brown. I then took some stripping agent to it and got the layers knocked off. I think there were at least 3. And then I don't remember how much I sanded it down, but I got it cleaned up at least. And I've been using this in my house for a handful of years, as is bare wood, which I'm kicking myself a little bit. I think I might have had some staining that I won't be able to get out. But just to look the piece over, I did not get all the paint off of it. And there are some areas that I patched with wood filler that really does not stain well at all. And the back side's kind of rough and not pretty at all, but usually those don't need to look that great anyway because it stays up against the wall, but it could be someone's preference to want to make the backside look great. My goal with this is to see if I can just make it look better than it does and keep it in my living room. So I don't know how well I can fix these spots and these damaged areas, but I don't want to paint it again because I love the wood look, and so I want to see if I can make this wood again. This drawer is missing its drawer stops, but I've replaced those on a desk I did a few years back, so I have some nail things I can use for that. These drawers, I don't know if you've heard me in other videos, I do not like having to sand down drawers, but these are really rough and they're going to need completely sanded, so that's kind of not exciting for me, but we'll see what we can do. And then there's multiple spots with these little indent places. We'll see if we can clean that up. So this is an experiment. We're going to see what I can make happen with this piece. There are also some of these drawer stops come out, so I'm going to have to nail those back in, which will be fine. I got my tools out that I have that could be used to clean out small spaces, and I'm gonna start with this dental pick. I don't know what it's actually called, but I'm gonna just dig in there and see if I can scrape out this white stuff. I think this might be one of the layers of paint, but I don't know if it had something glued in there at some point, because once I finally did get most of that white scraped out, there was this tealy turquoise colored residue left underneath, which, I don't know, maybe it was glue. I don't think this piece was ever painted that color. So that glue's my best guess. And I don't always have the best patience for tedious work. So I did this in different stages. I picked at it, went, okay, that's pretty good, walked away. Next day, looked at it and thought, oh, I need to pick at it a little more. And by the time I was done with this piece, I think it was okay. There was still a number of that teal turquoisey stuff left in there, but I don't know. Maybe there's a little itty bitty bitty sanding tool thing you could use to really, I don't know. I used sandpaper at one point. I might show you. Whatever. I got out what I could, and I really don't have the highest expectations for this piece because I really don't know if I can clean it up to look really good or if it's just going to be like, it looks better than it did. I don't know. So I'm coming in with 220 grit sandpaper, and as I'm watching this, doing the voiceover, I see that my sander is acting up. I'm pausing here because it was not running right, and I get through sanding this whole piece, but in hindsight now I see the next time I went to go use my sander, it actually had died. I had to go buy a new one. I'll probably talk about that in my next video because it died with that other project, but anyway, back to this piece. I'm using 220 grit sandpaper to sand all the spots out of this as best I can and get it even looking. But like I said, this is an experimental piece. I have an antique writing desk that I'm working on in conjunction with this. and I was concerned or unsure about how the staining would look, how the sanding's processing, and I just want the other piece to look really nice when it's done. It's a really nice desk, whereas this piece is, I don't know, it's so blotchy. I'm like, I don't know what I can make of this, but it's kind of my experiment piece, because if I find out that, you know, a blotchy wood, when I go to stain it, looks way more blotchy, you know, then I need to know this for my other piece. I don't stain a whole lot of pieces that are rough looking like this. So this is my guinea pig, but I sanded down all the sides, sanded down more of those spots that I had filled with wood filler, and those got, at least the filler portion was less visible. So that's helpful for me, and a lot of the blotchy spots on the wood are gone. I'm not sure if I have oil stains that will come back through, or stains that I just, you know, I left this as unfinished wood and I've used it for a handful of years in my living room. Cups have been sitting on it. You know, who knows what. It was not a wise choice. I stuck with the 220 grit sandpaper for sanding all the drawer fronts, and went ahead and used that as well on the sides and like top edges of the whole drawer, and that got everything off pretty nicely. A larger grit might have gotten a little more of that staining off of the sides, but it was okay for me. I did find a sticker for where this was made, and it was made in Ohio. I thought that was fun since that's the state I live in. But I did switch to a 120 grit sandpaper when it was time to do the insides of the drawers, as I really wanted to get that varnish off. It had some type of a top coat, whereas the outsides was more of the raw wood with just some extra dripping and stains and such. And it worked pretty good. It didn't take too much effort. I did not bother to go from the 120 to the 180 to the 220 that I normally do. I figure drawers are usually kind of a raw wood, as long as it's not splintery. To me, it doesn't have to be super smooth. And like I said before, I really don't like sanding drawers because of all the tiny crevices and whatnot. It's not my favorite. So as quickly as I can get them finished, the better. So another test I did, as I have these stain markers to see if I could marker color these spots that I patched, and this looked awful. So I was like, okay, don't do that. One of the drawers was cracked, and I just squeaked in some Gorilla Glue and clamped that down and let it sit overnight. I had a bubbly part on the top, and if I had a syringe for glue, I would probably try to put glue underneath it and clamp it down, but I don't have one. And it wasn't that bad of a bubble spot, so I have this stainable wood filler that I thought would maybe work better. Here's me using the sandpaper, trying to get more of that teal out of that decorative part. Maybe I should have just left it all white now that I think about it, but oh well. All right, with everything sanded down, I need to wipe it clean because I'm ready to stain. I have never used pre-stain, but I got some to try using because this is so splotchy. You can obviously see the splotchiness, and I want to know, if I have wood that's splotchy, can I stain it and it look good? Like, I literally don't know. So I use the pre-stain, and just putting this pre-stain on, it looks so much better. Like, I don't know. I don't understand wood that well. This just blows my mind. I love it. I think it's exciting. It's like a surprise. You go, what's going to happen when I put this on? So the instructions say to put this on, you let it sit for a little bit, and then you come back and wipe it off. But you do not want it to sit more than 2 hours before you put the stain on. So you want it to be pretty fresh. So once I got the piece done, I just went and grabbed my stain, which I decided to use Early American. I thought that would look good with this wood tone. And just use an old sock. I used that both with the pre-stain and the stain, and went over everything. I tried to go a little thicker in those areas that I patched that are so much lighter. And that helped a little bit, but I'll show you what I did later to help color those in. I feel like this stain looks so nice on it. This wood, I was shocked at these side panels and the top panel of how nice the wood grain looks. It's so nice. So with stain, after it sits for a little bit, you want to wipe off the excess and just make sure it's all nice and smooth. So while that dries, I decided to come in and nail in the drawer stops that were loose, and then come in and I just have these chicken coop U-shaped nails that I use instead of these fancy smanchy ones. You can buy those drawer stops, but they're way more expensive than a box of these nails, and it works just the same. So even though I'm not a detailed person, I did notice after staining that there were some gouges that had white paint. And I thought, this is going to look so bad if I don't take care of these. And I've seen people in videos go through and pick out all these little flecks of paint. And I'm like, I'm not doing that. But these bigger spots, I will definitely take a minute. Like on this corner, this was a pretty big chunk, and I was like, it's not going to look nice. I'm okay with a rustic look, but this was going to be too much. So I made sure to come through and poke that out. And then there were other spots on the front and the top, and just tried to assess, did I clean this up really well or not? There were some areas of paint that I should have cleaned up that I did not. I just want this to be a fairly simple flip. So here I did come back with more stain just on the areas that I had picked out and that I had filled in with wood filler to try to get them to match a little more. You can see they kind of stand out like a sore. Even though I decided these markers looked terrible the first time I tried, I did not try the darker one. And after this was stained, I thought, this is dark enough. If I do it gingerly, maybe I can make it work. So I started on these little side ones, so if it looked awful, it wouldn't be as visible, especially if you use this as a nightstand. It'll be next to a bed, most likely. So I was pleased with how those turned out, so I went ahead and moved to the top, but I started in the back, so if it looked kind of bad, it would be okay. I kind of wish I had a marker between this dark color and the lighter colors I have. I think that would have matched better, but this dark wasn't the worst. I'll show you in the final reveal how it ended up looking. It was, I don't know. You can comment. Tell me if you think it looked better as a light spot or if it looks better as a dark spot. I thought it looked better covered, kind of like the dark veins in the wood that's already there, that I went ahead and lightly did the dark color on the corner on the front as well. And if you look down below, there's a little June bug that is crawling along right up to my leg, and I never saw that the whole time. When I was using this piece after originally stripping all the paint off, I put new hardware on it that I had, but I found the old original hardware and cleaned it up by boiling it in vinegar water and scrubbed it with a metal brush to get all the paint and gunk off, because I decided if I'm going to kind of restore this to its original beauty, I wanted to use the original hardware if it still looked decent. And after scrubbing it up really good, I thought it looked pretty good. So then I tackled the knob, which was just a wooden knob covered in a few layers of paint. And between sanding with 120, 180, 220 grit sandpaper, I was able to get that cleaned up and smooth feeling, but it was very splotchy. And I thought, I don't know if I want to put that on, but figured I would do the top coat next. And once I got the piece finished, put the hardware on and see what I thought, if I should reuse the old stuff or go to new. I decided to use satin poly, and I'm using a foam brush. I have decided that the foam brushes, I think, work better than a regular paint brush. And I like the brush on poly over the wipe on poly because, from my understanding, it's water-based instead of oil-based. The wipe on is oil-based and can turn yellow, whereas this water-based should not turn yellow over time. I have not tested it myself. This is just what I've heard. So I put a nice delicate layer, an even coat as best as possible of this poly. And when you're putting on wipe on poly, you're trying to do smooth coats, not go over it too many times, not have the foam brush too thick. You want to go, look back over and make sure you don't have any drips anywhere, and just make sure the poly looks nice and level, because any area that's going to have buildup, you're going to see. And once that was set, I let that set for half a day or so, came back and sanded very, very gently with a 220 grit sandpaper. This is mostly just to get any bubbles out, because the bubbles do happen. It doesn't always completely settle. Or if you have any area that did build up a little bit, you can sand it very carefully. So after sanding it, you do a gentle wipe off, and then you're ready to do a second coat. And the poly cans usually suggest doing a 3 coat, so I did the same process for the 3rd coat as well. Once all of that was set, I did go in with Howard Feed and Wax and feed the drawers. And oh my goodness, these are the surprises I love. Something looks awful, and then you put a coat of this oil or stain, and it just looks so much better. Here's the 2 drawers. The one on the right has Howard Feed and Wax rubbed in all over it, and the one on the left is what it looks like sanded. It looks awful without the Howard Feed and Wax. It blows my mind. This is the fun part of flipping furniture and learning to do this stuff. I see these things and I can forget sometimes. Just trust the process. It's gonna look great. So at this point, we're ready to put the hardware on. And I wanted to put the medallions back on. But for the knob, I decided to try using that darker wood stain marker that I had. Because it was so splotchy, I thought the darker would cover more of that. But I'm wishing I had used the early American stain, because it did really nice on the sides of the piece, even though they were splotchy a little bit. So I wish I had used that instead of this marker. But I still wasn't sold that I wanted to use this knob, so I had 3 options. This first one on the left is the newer knob that I was using. The one on the right is the wood stain knob. And then the second picture is the left one's a silver knob and the right one's the wood stain knob. So of the 3, you can think about which one you'd pick. I want to talk about these spots that still showed through. That actually, it was interesting. I did not see these spots until I put the poly top coat on. I could not see them until then. So I don't know what that means. I wasn't super mad, because I knew that there was splotchiness that we were going to deal with. You can see the dark spots where I did the marker. It doesn't stand out like a sore, but it's noticeable if you know it's there. So overall, this piece I think turned out much better than I anticipated. I took a risk and did not do the nitty-gritty picking out the paint in the corners, and you can see it. So that's a good lesson for me. Be detailed if I want a piece to look brand new. Overall, I'm pleased with how this turned out. It definitely looks better than how it did before, and I've been using it for years of how it looked before. So we have definitely improved this piece, and I've learned some things along the way, which has been really helpful. And here's the corner where I picked out the paint, and I'm glad I did that. That definitely looks so much better. So I hope you've enjoyed this or learned something along the way with me about how to deal with splotchy looking wood. I think using that pre-stain was definitely a good step for this piece. It is recommended with softer woods to use those so that your stain then goes on more even. And I think aside from those random spots, that it did stain pretty evenly compared to how blotchy it looked before putting the pre-stain and stain on. So I might be an advocate for that. I think I'm going to use it on my next piece, the antique desk that I really want to turn out nice. So this was a good guinea pig for me to get my mind wrapped around what I want to do for my next piece. Thank you for joining me, and I look forward to catching you in my next video. Until then.